Good morning, and thank you for the invitation to be with you this morning. Happy Father's Day to all you dads out there and all you future dads. Little trivia to start with. Father's Day started on Juneteenth, 1910, when a woman named Sonora Dodd Smart, a resident of Spokane, Washington, wanted to honor her father, William Smart, who raised she and her 5 siblings on his own. It's interesting that Father's Day started with the idea of honoring. And did you know that your relationship with your father and your mother is intimately connected with the length of your life? Recall the quote in the ancient scriptures that completes or finishes with the words, that thy days may be long upon the earth. Honor. Does anybody remember the rest of that scripture? Well, what it says is, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the earth. Interesting when you look at that in context, this is not a statement of theology. This is a statement of physiology. Are you honoring your father and your mother? Do you even know what that means? Did you know that not understanding that particular directive is a poison to you? Did you know that that passage is not about your parents? Nothing whatsoever to do with your parents, but about inoculating your own mind against the unresolved challenges of your parents' lives. Another scripture says, look to the lives of the fathers, for ours are but a shadow of theirs upon the earth. What kind of lives have our fathers lived? Well, according to Henry David Thoreau, he says, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is desperation confirmed. From the desperate city, you go into the desperate country and have to console yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrat. Men go fishing all their lives without knowing that it's not the fish that they're after. What Thoreau was saying there is that most function unconsciously, and most people have no idea what's driving them. You know, the average person, why did you do that? I don't know. He's saying that behavior patterns are acquired and carried out unconsciously. In the ancient scriptures, they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. You notice they didn't say take care of your parents or the other guy or your spouse or your children. They said, take care of the heart. Now, in our modern updated language, out of the first century Aramaic language, that word heart means unconscious. In our context today, we'd say, take care of the unconscious, for out of it are the issues in life. And probably one of the greatest atrocities done to us down through the ages, and that we've bought into, is that we've had hidden from us the fact that we are by nature creators. If we are not creating consciously with full awareness, but rather out of the heart or the unconscious, then the patterns acquired from the generations will tend to play out in our lives, and we'll wonder where that came from. We'll blame somebody else for it and be sure that it's all their fault. There's a dynamic that we teach in a workshop we do called codependence to interdependence. And in that workshop, we introduce what we call a power person. And a power person is somebody in your life who had more power over your life than you did at some point. Usually, though not always, it's a parent. And usually, but not always, it's with a child. 3 things install in the mind what we call this power person dynamic. 3 factors, 3 things have to happen. 1, that person has more power over your life than you did at the moment. 2, they were not functioning as a human being. They were not functioning as love. And 3, you perceived the situation as survival. When that occurs, when somebody goes into that kind of survival mode, it's as though their energy field just opens wide and they become much like a sponge. They simply absorb every energy dynamic in the environment. Let's say, the power person is raging, then all that rage is just absorbed into the system. And 2, 10, 20, 50 years later, this person flies into a fit of rage with no idea and certainly no desire to be in rage. It takes them over. And it takes them over because it's a power person dynamic. Once that power person dynamic is installed in this human energy system, there are literally only 3 behaviors that a person will be bound to for the rest of their lives if they've never wake up, their own unconscious dynamics, and learn how to remove those power person issues. The behaviors that they'll do will be linked to the level of stress that we're under. And this whole idea ties into that idea of honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days will be long upon the earth. And I just invite you to look at your own life and just see how this fits. When there's no stress, there's a thing in the mind called the automatic decision system. When that automatic decision system cuts in, a person will do whatever they did to get along with their power person. If they were Mr. Nice Guy, they'll be Mr. Nice Guy. When stress starts to build, second level happens of behavior, and they'll do whatever they did to resist and survive with their power person. So if somebody was Mr. Snarky at that moment, they move from Mr. Nice Guy to Mr. Snarky. And then when they become ultra stressed, they'll do whatever their power person did to them that they hated the most. And there's no choice about it. Automatic decision system cuts in, and that's what drives the mind and behavior. That unconscious functioning. And until one discovers the tools with which to remove that unconscious functioning, whenever that part of the mind is triggered into activity, that's what will run the show. Now, it sounds, on first hearing, a little complicated. Ultimately, it's really very simple. But if you need support with understanding this, I want to invite you to tap into our radio show from 1 till 2 o'clock, 5 days a week. You can call into our radio show, and you can ask all the questions you have and get support for understanding and utilizing these tools. The radio show is an internet show, so you can watch it on the internet, listen to it there, or you can call in on your phone. Most people have unlimited long distance these days. And the call-in number for the show, if you want to mark this down, is 563-999-3581. Call that 5 days a week, and except for the occasion when someone fills in or I'm not there, you'll be having a conversation with me, and we're here delighted to support you with using these tools and understanding these dynamics. You can also go to our website, whyagain.org, and or you can go into your phone's app store, type in the words Heartland, Heartland, one word, Aramaic, Aramaic, forgiveness. You'll be looking at the world's only forgiveness app, and you can work with the ancient Aramaic tool of forgiveness right there on your phone. And in that language, as opposed to what we've been taught in this Greek-oriented culture, the word forgive has nothing to do with the explanation we've been given, and that is, well, of course, they did something terrible that caused all this pain inside of me, but it's okay. I'm just supposed to forgive them. I'm supposed to let them off the hook for what's happening inside of me. If I let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me, have I done anything to change what's happening inside of me? Absolutely nothing. Never forgive anyone for anything. Forgiveness, if you've had that power person dynamic installed in your own mind, forgiveness is the tool with which you go into your own unconscious, access your own unconscious dynamics, and bring them forward for healing. And I'll offer that healing is the act of bringing any unconscious part of our mind forward that's based in either hostility or fear, and bringing it forward in the presence of love. And when that energetic dynamic from within is truly exposed to active present love, then that ancient, often generational dynamic is undone. So we want to move from that back to, what's happening with dads, what's happening with men in America. How are we doing as men? Well, the latest statistics tell us that we're at a 44.6% divorce rate in this culture. And 1 in 4 children, that is about 18.3 million, are living in homes without fathers. Healing is needed in our culture, in our family systems, in our communities. And I hope that today will inspire you to dig into some really serious healing tools and begin to do the inner work that's required to clean up that source of, if you're living there, a life of quiet desperation. It's kind of shocking in our culture, but from 1950 to 2018, the suicide rate of men in America was 360% greater than with women. And I'm bringing this forward because I want to point out that we need to apply effort and understanding as to how to change this dynamic, or it's not going to change. If we look at life expectancy, around 1800, this is just a little, trivia here. Around 1800, life expectancy throughout the world is estimated to have been approximately 30 years of age. By 1900, life expectancy was about 70 years in the first world countries. And in the 150 years since 1800, when they estimated it was about 30, the average lifespan globally was 60. Pretty amazing. It doubled in that time period. And of course, you might ask yourself the question, well, what happened? Well, why did the life expectancy double from 1800 to 1850 on a global scale and rise to 70 plus years in first world countries? Well, I'd offer that it was the dissemination of knowledge and how to change a mind, especially how to integrate and act on discovered knowledge. That caused lifespan to more than double. Now, contrary to what some believe, there's been awesome cooperation and rapid progress in health globally. By 2019, the lowest life expectancy in any country, so just about 100 years ago, 200 it was 30, the lowest life expectancy was 53 in 2019. And the average life expectancy in 2019 was 70 plus. Now that's pretty amazing. Now, how did that happen? Again, I'd offer it was an understanding, primarily of 3 things: how to reduce child mortality, how to improve nutrition, and how to improve sanitation. The mind had to understand, integrate, and take action on that knowledge for those changes to occur. Now, if you're going to make the next leap, if you're going to be part of making the next leap to the next level of life expectancy, then you're going to have to do that same thing. You're going to have to understand, integrate, and take action on the knowledge that takes us there. And I'll tell you what, Fathers are going to have a lot happier Father's Day if you and I pick up and do our work and clean up the mess that the lives of the fathers of the past have left us. So back to our topic today, men, and of course, in particular, our fathers. In 1970, men in America died an average of 8.7, almost 9 years earlier than the women in their lives. And by 2020, that figure was just under 5 years. So it went from almost 9 to under 5 years. And it's been suggested that that happened primarily because men started to understand and make a change in their lives in regard to one major thing, and that was tobacco. That's what the statisticians tell us is the key to that change in that short time period. Now, I'm going to offer that the next great improvement in lifespan will come from understanding and integrating the power of the mind to move the body from survival and stress. And too often, you look at homes where fathers are not present. You look at the stresses that men in our culture live under. And that stress, that survival mode, is a state of most men, our fathers. Even the big, tough, hard-nosed ones, they live in fight and flight and fright and freeze. Now, that means survival. When we're in that state, this whole organism is set by thousands of years of practice to survive. But if we remain in that state, that survival mode, in medicine, it's called a sympathetic dominant nervous system. That sympathetic dominant nervous system sets us up for survival, but it kills us early. It means a short lifespan. Now, if we're going to recover what's truly possible for a human being, we've got to move out of that sympathetic dominant state where everything is tight and locked, protective, protect the extremities, cut blood flow to extremities so that if injury occurs, we get to survive the injury. The jungle, the lion comes, that blood flow is restricted. Energy movement through the structure is restricted. It's tight. It's focused in its core. Yes, it's set for battle. But if you stay in that state for long, you're going to die because the system is not designed to function like that. So when we move from that sympathetic dominant state to what they call in medicine the parasympathetic dominant state, energy and blood move freely. Restrictions are removed, blood pressure drops, sugar levels drop, nutrients move freely. And what is it that causes that to happen? Do you remember that scriptural quote we talked about? Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days be long upon the earth. That's the key. Now, honor, people say, well, my parents were so nasty. Why would I ever do that? Well, you especially need to understand and follow that directive. Why? Because if you lived in a home where father and mother were violent, neglectful, where love was not present, then the power person dynamic that's been installed in your physiology leaves you in that sympathetic dominant state continuously. That means a shortened lifespan. When you move out of that and honor, you'll notice if you look in the scriptures, there's another directive. And this directive is about the whole world. And the Greeks tell us that it says, love your neighbor, love the creator as yourself, which is not what it says in the first century Aramaic language. Actually, in the Aramaic, what was spoken of there was a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that was called rachma. what Yeshua said in response to people's question, what do we have to do to really live as human beings? He says, you've got to have this gateway and this filter active in your mind. It's called Rachma. And that filter is the gate and is the gateway that brings human life, the active presence of love, into your physiology. Have you ever held a newborn child? Think about it. Take a moment. Go back to the moment where you first held that newborn. If you tap into the essence of that newborn, what is its essence? Now, that's a question my wife, Jeannie, and I have asked of tens of thousands of people all over the globe. And virtually 100% of the time, the answer we get is always some variation on the theme of love. Why? Everybody knows what human life is. Sympathetic dominance does not allow human life into the human form. It inhibits it, it closes it out. And when we're disconnected from that, degeneration begins. So that directive, and you'll notice it was like for everybody, but there's that one other directive for just this special category of people called parents. Honor. What is honor? Honor, I would offer, is functioning from a space of love within yourself. You know, think about that newborn. When you tap into that newborn essence, is the newborn loving you or is the newborn love? I would offer that love is life flowing through a cell. Our essence is love, and we have to inhabit and flow through this cellular structure. But restricted by that sympathetic dominant state, love is cut out of the system. So the directive that was given for the parents was, and that word honor in Aramaic in its first century context means to function from a space of love toward your parents. Now people say, well, but my parents were so nasty. Why would I want to do that? It's especially important for you to do it because you've got all that power person dynamic locked into tissue. All the hostilities and fears that never belonged in a human system and block the flow of life through your cellular structure. So it is not dependent on whether they deserve it. It's not about them. It's about me functioning out of my essence, maintaining the presence of love in my physiology so that I really truly function as a human being. So we need to move from that lockdown, tightened survival space into the ability to thrive. Now, Jonas Salk, fellow who invented the Salk vaccine, says, one of the most important things to do is to be a good ancestor. What is a good ancestor? Would you believe that it's cleaning up the generational patterns that have been unresolved and gone from generation to generation to generation? Remember that story about the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years? Did you ever think about that? Here's a very bright group of people who understand astronomy very well, and they're lost in a 35 square mile area for 40 years. Does that make any sense? Do you think they couldn't have gotten up one morning and went, well, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. We want to go west, let's follow it. Couldn't have been locked in a 35 square mile area for very long. Wasn't about a hot sandy place. That was a story about living in the unconscious. That word desert is another code word in the scriptures for the unconscious. And you remember they said, in order to get out of the desert into what was called the promised land, which is conscious co-creation, they said the old generation had to die off. That didn't mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the causes held in the mind had to go. Honoring your father and your mother, the primary source for those who carry hostility and fear in them is that power person relationship. And bringing the active presence of love forward in the presence of parents, which means all of the internal dynamics are going to be moving, whatever's moving within will begin to dissolve in the active presence of your love. It's probably one of the most important things we could do to expand the global lifespan. And to do it, we must face the past and forgive. Now, when I say forgive, I'm not talking about letting your parents off the hook for what they did or didn't do. Forgiveness has nothing to do with anybody else. If Yeshua sat in most churches in the Western world today and listened to them talk about forgiveness, how you're supposed to forgive everybody, he'd say that's all Greek to me, because that's a totally Greek idea. In Aramaic, the word forgive is a tool with which you go inside yourself and remove the root of your fear and hostility, the things that keep you in a sympathetic dominant state, so that your tissue structure can soften, let go, and let the active presence of love, life, flow through it. Now, each of us is wired for decisions that replicate our fathers. In this case, the source of my thinking, if it's that power person dynamic, then I need to do something to change that, change the source of my thinking. And that seems to leave us, that power person dynamic leaves us little ability to play out and deal with those impacted unconscious experiences that tend to drive our behavior. Stepping up to the space where we breathe and we choose to do our work and to shift that state becomes key. To become the fathers we were meant to be, we have to face and heal the excesses of the generations, the abused child, the self-centeredness, the violent thoughts, words, actions, all of those survival dynamics. Doing our generational work is the opportunity to energetically change, literally to change the world. And my offering is that's what we're here to do. This takes making a choice, not just repeating the patterns of the power person or of the generations. How often have we had somebody say, little Johnny there, his father was dead before he ever came along, but boy, he looks like him, he talks like him, he stands like him, he even says words like him. How does that happen? These are energetic patterns that are coded into our genes, and we have the birthright to clean up our genes. What's the key? Function from love when you think of your power person or are in their presence. Because when those unconscious dynamics start to surface and love is conscious, active, and present, healing occurs. Rather than being unconsciously pushed around by the vicissitudes of life, this person who does their work becomes a conscious agent, activating the divine spark in themselves and doing what it takes to undo the past, to consciously, purposely function as the presence of love we were designed to be. This one chooses to step up and do the work of Yeshua and overcomes the quote unquote lives of the fathers. And rather than being a shadow of theirs upon the earth, make new choices from a mind connected to love. Literally, this one rewrites their neurology and biology to be an expression of their created essence. My invitation is that you just take a deep breath for a moment. And as you center and focus into that breath, let that breath go. I'm just going to ask you to pay attention to your breath for the next few minutes as we tap into a deeper space of love. And through no fault of their own, oftentimes the fathers, the mothers who did not know themselves as love were simply carrying out the power person dynamics of their lives. Let us now be the space. And, in your being, there's a big enough space for total abundance and generosity to give this, even though someone may not seem to deserve it. Let us now be the space of love and hold up our fathers and every father that has ever lived on the planet Earth. Let us hold these fathers up in being in the truth of who they actually are or were. Let us hold together the fathers of the world in that space, especially those who are in need of support because they didn't know any better. By doing so, you become the spotless name. You got it from your father. It was his gift to give. So it's yours to use and cherish for as long as you may live. If you lose the watch he gave you, it can always be replaced. But the blemish on your name is a challenge to erase. So make sure you guard it wisely. After all is said and filed, you'll be glad the name is spotless when you give it to your child. Happy Father's Day and blessings.